this understanding of Islam that, Islam has nothing to do with politics. I didn't call it politics, it's social justice. Which is very clear in Islam. كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله. Allah says, "O believers, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to God." Right? So justice, adl and qist are very important parts of our deen. We cannot take it away. Right? So that's a very sad part of our lives, that our community was not embracing us. And now how to heal from that?
On today's episode, we hosting Imam Rashied Omar, a peace lover, if that's the right term in the media as they describe. He leads the Salah in Claymont Main Mosque, and he also teaches at University of Notre Dame. Imam, shukran so much for coming here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I want to start with the story that we were talking about before we start here. You told me you kind of mix between Islam and the modern education, as your mom wanted you to do madrasa, the Islamic studies, and your dad wanted you to do the secular education, and you did both. How did that happen, and what was your relationship between both of them?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To you, Abdul Aziz, and your viewers. Wonderful to be with you. I pray Allah guide my tongue and opens your hearts and minds, so that in the few minutes we will be together, we will be able to find some good lessons and inspire each other, inshallah. So with regard to your question, I come from a very average Muslim family. We didn't have any great scholars in our family, but I discovered that as a young man, I was able to recite the Quran very beautifully. This is a gift that Allah gave me. And of course, your parents are very happy when you are able to recite the Quran. They then wanted me to go to a higher, which we call Madrasa Islamiyya fi Hifz al-Quran, right? To memorize the Quran.
Islamic school.
Yeah. But a special one where we memorize Quran, which is a big tradition in Cape Town, as you know. We have a long tradition of people having memorized Quran. And there was a wonderful school close to where I live in Salt River, which is about 5 kilometers outside of the city of Cape Town. Very close. We can go, little neighborhood nestled between two more prominent communities, Oudtshoorn and Observatory, in between that. So there was a very good school there. My mother was very excited. And my father was worried, because the tradition in Cape Town was that if you do the Hifz al-Quran, because it's such an arduous and tedious undertaking, you have to do it full time. Right? So it meant that I would have to leave my public schooling, right? The secular school, and then go to a religious school. So there was some debate in the family and so on. And my mother, as mothers are, they're often more spiritual and loving the Quran. My father also, and she was very keen that if that's what the Ustad wants, you should go. And my father was, how is he going to earn a living, right? He also needs to. So they went to the Ustad, Hafiz Shamsuddin Ibrahim, rahimahullah, a very great Imam and Hafiz al-Quran. And he said, okay, let's see how he does it for a few months. And that, I think, was a blessing, a great blessing. because what happened is that I needed to go to the public school and I needed to memorize. So there is a lot of pressure for time management. So you have to get up maybe before Fajr.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, because, as soon as you come from the public school at around 3 p.m., you have to go to the Hafiz school.
And homeworks and stuff.
Homework and all of that. But it's amazing. I mean, what human beings can achieve when they are under pressure, right? So it worked for 3 months. And I think also the Ustad, I should credit him, the vision that he had. He was a very humble, simple man. He didn't have that. He was only a Hafiz al-Quran. But I think he had the vision. And through his guidance and my parents, I managed to memorize the entire Quran in 30 months. From 1972, September 1972, to March 1975. And also go to the public school. So it was done part-time. And on weekends, on a Saturday, we used to go full-time in the mornings. But of course, as you know, that it's not easy, but relatively more easy to memorize the entire Quran, but to maintain it, you have to...
the most difficult.
They call muraja, right? The revision, to be able to read at any point, any juz at any time. So it requires long, hard work. But in any case, I managed to memorize Quran, and then that, I think, is my claim to fame, as it were. I was also able to recite with a good tajweed, correct pronunciation, and tartil, reading it beautifully and slowly. And that's, I think, as a young man, as you know, an imam, for leading the daily prayers, you have to read Quran correctly, and you have to, for the loud prayers, Fajr, Maghrib, Isha, they want someone who reads melodiously. So that's basically how I got into a leadership position. I should then transition that I finished my Hifz al-Quran part-time in 1975, and in 1976, which was a great year in South African history, I was in my final year in high school. And I got caught up in the protests, the youth protest that was happening.
Did it come out all from Salt River as the activism was strong there, or different places?
No, it started in Soweto, in Johannesburg.
Yes.
Because what happened is that the Apartheid regime wanted to impose the Afrikaans language on everyone. So that should be the medium of instruction in all schools. And people, of course, rebelled against that.
But in Cape Town, your
then
involvement.
It spread all over the country from Soweto, and it also came to Cape Town. At the University of the Western Cape was a big, and then of course high schools as well. And Salt River High School took a leading role. So we had a number of high schools coming together to see how we could coordinate, how we could show solidarity in support of our fellow students and comrades in Soweto and other way who had been killed, were being brutalized. And I was, part of the Student Representative Council. And so we led a huge march, one of the biggest marches from the Salt River High School.
In high school?
In high school, yeah. Then remember, this is now my final year in high school, so I'm a little bit more older than the other students, lower down and so on. And then we led this huge protest in September of 1976 into the city of Cape Town. And there is a little documentary that has been made about this, which your viewers may want to look at. It's called The Salt River 10. And of course, it was broken up. It was brutalized. We were beaten, tear gas. And shortly after that, some of us were arrested.
You were one of them.
I was one of them, and also my younger brother. I was 17 years old, and he was only 14 years old.
Sorry, I'm gonna stop you here. So before we continue into this, your activism and your Quranic studies and your secular studies, did it have any kind of impact on your siblings that a lot of them were involved or also in this kind of activism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the elder brother always is a role model, and there is some good in that, very many good, but there are also some not so good. So my younger brother, he because I was memorizing Quran, and my parents now pushing him, he also must memorize Quran, and every sibling is different, isn't it? And he has his own gifts. He started memorizing, but then it wasn't for him, and so on. But my parents disappointed, your elder brother doing that. But come back to the earlier questions. I'm not sure that I answered it correctly because I was meandering about my own history. I wouldn't say mixing. I would call it building bridges.
Building bridges.
Between the traditional Islamic education, which is the Hifz al-Quran, which is a lot about rote learning, memorization, and the more modern secular education, which is more critical thinking. Right? And we need both. So my whole life has been building the bridge, and thanks to my own trajectory, my own life history, which alhamdulillah, one wakes up one day and you say, how did this happen? It is the divine mercy of Allah that I was able to be in the traditional Islamic madrasa school, memorizing the Quran, and in the public secular school. So I needed to build bridges. That has been my entire. So it's not around mixing, it's about and bringing the best of both, right? So I'll give you one example. I'm jumping again here. So when I came to the University of Cape Town in 1978.
This was for your undergrad
studies. Yeah. Of course, I was now very good at memorization, right? So I was doing a course in African history, and I took some very copious notes, and then transcribed them, put them in good language, and then when the exam came, I had memorized it, so I, could write, page after page, verbatim, and the professor was, of course, he was astounded, right? And he called me in, and I knew, of course, he was going to say, where did you copy this from? So a young man, very arrogant. I mean, he calls me in, and I'm saying, okay, I know what you want. I'm going to teach you something about, what we have in Islam. So, but he was a very old man, a very wise man, and so he gently asked me, young man, you did so well in this exam. You gave me exactly my notes, about him. How do you do that? So I said, I can repeat it for you. He said, I said, yeah. So he said, okay. So then I started, after the first paragraph, he said, stop. He said, how do you do this? So I explained to him that we get training in memorizing the Quran, the entire 30 ajza, and he was so astounded, he was very impressed by it. And he commended me and wanted to find out more about this form of education and how widespread it is. And he said this is very lacking in the Western world. But then he gave me one important lesson. He said to me, you have done so well, and I have to give you an A, right? But I can't give you 100%. I said, why? He said, because, history is not merely about the regurgitation, the recitation of facts. Where is your voice? What do you think about how I or other historians have interpreted these facts? And of course, I wasn't sure what he was saying. But that was the greatest lesson in my life, what is called critical thinking. applying your own mind to a particular situation. So I think this is something that I've discovered. I'm not sure that I can generalize, but in Islamic education, we are high on rote learning, on regurgitating fatwa and opinions of great Islamic scholars in the past, whether it is Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, whether it is Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah, whoever it is. But how do we apply it to this modern world? We need to have both, forms of education. Anyway, sorry, I was going on.
If we can go back to the story when yourself and your brother at the protest from there, you said they start tear gas and all of that, and your brother and yourself were arrested.
That's correct. So that was a very traumatic period in our lives. I mean, as young people, and even more traumatic for our parents, right? So we were arrested. Luckily, we didn't, stay too long in the prisons. We were then released, but we had a very good lawyer. He became the first Minister of Justice under Mandela. Minister Dalla Umar or Abdullah Umar. So he was the lawyer defending us, and he did a very good job. So they released us into the custody of our parents, but we had to go to the Woodstock police station, which is the closest police station to us. It's about maybe 2 kilometers from our home. 7 a.m. in the morning and 7 p.m. in the evening to sign a register that we were in that area. Because at that time, in the late 1970s, a lot of young people were leaving the country, crossing the border, going into exile, joining the armed struggle, right? So that continued for a couple of months, and they put us on trial. A court trial. Fortunately, again, we had this very good lawyer. This is one of the success stories. If we had been convicted of the contrived crimes they purported we had committed, we would have maybe gone to prison for 5 years. But thanks to the ingenuity and of our lawyer, Dalla Umar, we, got off, right? We won the case, but we were suspended from school for that year. So that was 1976, in my final year of school. In 1977, I later in that year was allowed to go back to school to complete my matric, my high school, but I had to sign some document that I would not get involved in
any trouble,
any kind of politics and so on. I was resisting, but my father insisted that, and at the time it was, kind of tensions between us, but I think he was the wiser one.
From the Imam, how would you say what would you say the most memorable stories during apartheid in your life as a high schooler and at university? These two kind of young kind of period that you're still learning about critical thinking, it's still learning about your own country, you're still learning about apartheid and what does it do to society and all of that. And I do believe that at that time Imam wasn't yet an Imam. He was like a Hafiz and a student representative and all of that.
Yeah, so maybe I should start with the two stories. And I often think that, the more difficult stories in our lives, challenging ones where we don't want to think about them. We only want to think about successes, huh? But the ones in which we are really down, I think they have lots of lessons for us. So one of the most difficult periods in my life was in that period of imprisonment. And it was a period in which, of course, they're putting 10 of us in a cell, and they're taking 1 and 2, and then those we leave behind. What are they doing to that guy, right? and you have all kinds of things that they're torturing and so on. So that was really a moment where I found I had to dig deep into my own spirituality and faith commitment, right? So to sustain yourself.
How old were you that time?
I was 17, right? And so I would lead the salah because most of us were Muslim. But interestingly enough, there was one of our comrades who was not a Muslim. His father was a hardcore Marxist. And he used to, so when we were performing the salah, right, then he prays with us, right? He said, because, you have time. What do you do with your time? So he said, we said, yeah, join us. And he joined us. We taught him some, Fatiha and so on, which he can still read. He's not a Muslim now, but to sustain. And then, we asked him also to say some prayers, and he would read some poetry or whatever. But that, I think, was a very tender moment for me. And Quran, of course, sustained me. If you memorize the Quran, you can use your time. This is the time. And so I not only found within myself this great ability to sustain, but also to help others. Right? And I think this is what an Imam is, right? So I wasn't the Imam there. I'm leading the prayers in the prison, and this is coming out. And often I think about, if I'm thinking about my own experience, about the many others who have suffered incarceration, who are currently even suffering in many parts of the world. I mean, I was so sad this morning, or last night I read that, currently there is in Syria, right? In Syria, fall of the Assad regime. And they're saying that underneath, I'm not sure, I need to check. There are some prisons that there are prisoners there and they can't open it because there is a code. I don't know what kind of doors they have, and those prisoners are. And for me then, having experienced that, I have nightmares. Everyone is celebrating outside, and these people are trapped underneath, thousands of them. Right, and I pray that Allah makes it easy for them, whoever has the code to. So we are fighting, easy, about, is it real freedom? Is it designers? Is it the Americans? But there are people suffering. So we forget but for me, I give you another example. I'm jumping here, right? One of the tafsir al-Qur'ans, the commentaries of the Quran, that gives me the greatest inspiration. Beautiful, beautiful Arabic as well. Anyone who reads Arabic, But this man in the United States, you can't even mention his name. His name is Sayyid Qutb. He wrote so beautiful title of his Fi Dhilal al-Quran, living in the shade of the Quran. And I know why, because I lived in the shade of the Quran. What does Sayyid Qutb mean? It was written in prison. When he was being tortured, dogs being put onto him, I cannot even think. But the Quran gave him that sustenance. And if you read his tafsir, there is no about violence and stuff. It is just beautiful poetry and bringing out the beauty of the Quran. So anyway, that was, I think.
You said there was two incidents that you kind of.
The other one was, so when I come out of prison, this is another sad story. Then the community is not embracing us.
The Muslim community.
Yes, in our community, myself and my brother, we are like lepers, right? They are telling their children don't mix with, don't play with them because.
And that's because
they are fearing.
That you're gonna have
that
influence.
We will influence them, or the police will see that and take them. Maybe they know something about us or something like that. So it's not only fear, but also this understanding of Islam that, Islam has nothing to do with politics. I didn't call it politics, it's social justice. Which is very clear in Islam. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ. Allah says, "O believers, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to God." Right? So justice, adl and qist are very important parts of our deen. We cannot take it away. Right? So that's a very sad part of our lives, that our community was not embracing us. And now how to heal from that. Also, these are all sad stories. So when they were forced to release us because of the good arguments by our lawyer, they then put high amounts of money to release us, as a bond. They call it bail, right? You have to pay money, so in case you run away, they will take the money.
Yes.
So the amount was too exorbitant. And my father had 2 sons, myself and my brother Anwar. We were the 2 elders. He couldn't afford it. So he appealed to the local Muslim community. "Look, I don't have this money. Can you help us?" They said,
No.
Because they were afraid. They give the money, maybe they will be implicated. So we got the money from Christian church. Imagine. They didn't think that these are Muslims. They gave the money. They said they know there was justice. And that,
Social
I think,
justice,
left a great impression on us. So, at that time, then I was really, even though my faith commitment had been strengthened in prison, now I'm doubting outside by the behavior of fellow Muslims. So, going through a difficult period at that time.
From the Imam, I think we a little bit, we're going to go through the impact later on your life because of these kind of stories. But from the Imam moved from Salt River and that kind of activism to, I would say, a middle class area that doesn't have the same kind of influence when it comes to social justice and activism, but it does have a lot of social justice and activism, which is Claremont, where the main mosque that you are leading the Salah in, and you are the Imam in here, and you reside here and you become the Imam here. How did that happen, and what kind of transition was that?
Yeah, so that I think is again another good story, because remember I'm telling you that after we from prison, we got off our court trials, and our community is not embracing us, and we are now in doubting. We are struggling to find ourselves. So the challenge for me is how then do we, again, that bridge between faith, commitment to Islam, and social justice. How do we bring that together? And again, fortuitously, but also, Allah's divine rahmah and mercy, there was a man who lived, who was close to my parents, lived in Salt River. His name is Al-Hajj Qasim Sadan, rahimahullah. He was the brother-in-law of Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haron, the great martyr who was killed in apartheid detention in 1969. And so he was from Claremont, but they had been moved out of this area because of the Group Areas Act. And he asked my parents, they are looking for a Hafiz al-Quran to lead the Taraweeh prayers in a masjid called the Claremont Main Road Masjid. I knew nothing about the masjid.
Just a side note, this masjid is 150 years old. It's
currently
not like
it's 170 years old.
70 years
So
old.
it's built in 1854.
Ah.
So this is the 4th oldest masjid in the whole of South Africa.
Ah.
And the first one outside of the Buaka.
Okay.
And this masjid is the same masjid that Imam Haron,
Was that
grew up in.
Imam? Grew up in.
Yeah. So this was but when he was appointed as Imam in 1955, he was appointed at another masjid, which is about 2 kilometers from here, the Al Jamia Masjid, also in Clermont, in Stegman Road. Right. But he is from here. He is from here. In fact, his father remained part of this congregation, even though his son was appointed there. Right. But so I came before the Ramadan, just to see. I think we have celebrations of big nights. So it was Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj, right? The 27th of Rajab. Or people meet in the mosques, and they get to hear stories about Al Isra wal Mi'raj, and they anticipate Ramadan, right? To prepare themselves. And so there was. I came here, and there was a predecessor of mine, Imam Hassan Solomon, rahimahullah, and he gave a wonderful, and I loved it. And they were all the students of Imam Rashied Abdullah Haron. And so, quite fortuitously, I discovered this: how to link faith commitment and social justice in this masjid. After I'd been kind of doubting and struggling with it, Allah guided me here, and since 1979 I led the prayers here. I think I learned so much as a young man, not only from Imam Hassan Solomon's, but also from all of the students of Imam Haron. So I never met Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haron, but I had, as if I could see him, because these were his companions, these were his students.
We're speaking about Imam Haron, and there was a lot of important stories in the South African history about Imam Haron, his social justice fights for Muslims and non-Muslims as well. We spoke before we start about the injustice that happened towards you, and reflecting on that towards Imam Haron from the community. How did that make you feel, and was it like a push forward to continue this struggle when it comes to the ulama, when it comes to and it might come from an ignorant place, it might come from a scared place. I don't know, how would Imam describe it?
I as I said, I found this great inspiration, what I was looking for. Right? How do I combine faith commitment and social justice? I found it in the Imam, through his students who were left behind. And so then I began thinking that I should research. So I did an honors degree at the University of Cape Town, studying in detail the life of Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haron. And I would say that I model myself on him. I hope I'm doing justice to his great legacy. But he started in 1955, when he became the Imam, this project, or this orientation towards Islam in South Africa, of combining faith commitment and social justice. Right? He started that project from 1955 until he was martyred in 1969. His students then continued it, and I am a fortunate recipient. Imam Hassan Solomon's, my predecessor, continued it. He was a very prominent figure in the United Democratic Front. From this masjid, I was his understudy, where he spoke out vehemently against the anti-apartheid, against the apartheid regime. This masjid was then known as a politics masjid by the community, which is not true. His last sermon he gave in this masjid in 1985, around August, September. The police was looking for him, and he escaped in the Eid al-Adha. He escaped and went into exile, and then he left. I was his Naib Imam and deputy, and then I became the Imam. This heavy responsibility. But I should say to you as well that, and I learned this from Imam Haron, the greatness of Imam Haron is not only about himself, it's about the fact that he was willing to learn from the young people. He learned the politics from them.
Not the opposite, as they
and he
say.
gave them the teaching of the deen, of Islam, how to pray and so on. And they taught him. And that's what I call a symbiotic relationship between the Imam and the young people produced the greatest thing. And that's what I call servant leadership. So, you think about, of course, your program is like that, great or prominent individuals. But it's not about us. It's about also the people. This masjid has very talented people. As I told you when I came, there were the students. They were the ones who inspired me, who taught me, right? And I'm eternally grateful for them. And even now, I'm always looking in my congregation for young people, for people with talents who could enrich my own leadership. And that's the example of Shaheed Imam Abdullah Haron. So from 1955, we are trying to continue building on that legacy of a particular orientation towards Islam, which is faith, commitment, and social justice.
Would you say, Imam, that his legacy was celebrated only after he was martyred, but during the struggle, during the need for the support, he didn't find that no one supported that kind of legacy? Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I mean, but this is not a crisis in worldview, in thinking, or in praxis of only Muslims in Cape Town or South Africa. It's a crisis in the world, right?
We only celebrate our heroes after.
Yeah, but not only that. About this faith and social justice. Politics, it's dirty. We don't call it politics. I call it social justice. Adl and qist. I'm going to speak to you about politics, siyasah shar'iyya later, right? So when Imam Haron, he was very alone, right? If I was in the late 70s, was experiencing that from my community, that, this guy is a politician, we should keep away from him, our children. What about in the late 50s and 60s? He comes before me. He was experiencing it. So he was in detention for 123 days. Not a single Muslim leader spoke out saying, please release him or charge him. The complete silence. You were saying that they celebrated him afterwards. They even didn't celebrate him afterwards. So when he was, martyred on the 27th of September 1969, 2 days later, it was his janazah. Over almost 30,000 people came to his janazah, and they walked from Athlone about maybe 10 kilometers to the maqbara, to the gravesite in Mowbray. It was really a demonstration against because people knew he had been killed. They didn't believe the story that he fell from stairs in the prison. But immediately after that, everyone became quiet. And it was actually not Muslims, it was non-Muslims who were protesting his death. There was a Christian priest, an Anglican priest by the name of Reverend Bernie Rankmore, who went to the nearby shrine of early Muslims in Signal Hill, and he started fasting in protest that the government the apartheid regime should institute an inquiry as to why, what was the reason.
How did he get killed?
Yeah. Some Muslims some religious leaders were saying, what is that kafir doing in our shrine? Get him out there, that infidel. So then when did Muslims begin to realize about it's us after 1976 when some Muslim youth were being conscientized, like myself, then we were looking for inspiration. Then we found Imam Haron. So you will see the commemorations of the martyrdom of Imam Haron every year, annually, started only after 1976. Why is that? Because we were radicalized, we were politicized, we were conscientized by the same factors, Muslims, that conscientize other youth. Other youth were also conscientized. So,
sorry, Imam.
Come back to this. This is the same crisis in the Muslim world. You know, you look at one of my great inspirations. You know, great scholar, a great scholar. I still read him, and I pray Allah, you know, grants him the highest place in paradise. You know, rahimahullah, Sheikh Saeed Ramadan al-Bouti from Syria. He was a great scholar, but when it comes to speaking out against the tyranny of Hafiz al-Assad, you know, the Bashar al-Assad, his father, he was silent. You know that? So it's a crisis in the Muslim world, that, you know, how they interpret, you know, some Quranic verses, wa ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri, obey God and obey His messenger and those in authority, even if they have abused their authority, they have come to power, they are despots, right? This is the same that we have inherited from our legacy, unfortunately. I want to jump something else as well.
And then we have to go after that immediately to another point. But
okay,
yes.
So one of the crises is what should be the relationship, and this is what South Africa, we as Muslims, we have many problems, corruption and so on, and people are celebrating the wrong things. But there are some very important lessons. What should be the relationship between religion, whether it's Islam or Christianity, and the state? Deen wa dawla, al-ilaqat baynahum, right? Crisis all over the world. Either you have, you know, stay away from everything, or you have the religion wants to be in the state, right? A theocracy. Or, you know, maybe in Palestine or elsewhere, I pray, I call it shirkud dawla. You know, you want to have an Islamic state, and you think everything will be solved. We can't even run a masjid properly. What about the state, right? It doesn't matter who is in power in the state, as long as it's a just state, whether it's Muslims or not, the best people who can bring us justice. Religion must hold those in power accountable. We must be outside of the state, alongside other civil society actors.
Oh, this would cause a lot of issues.
Debate,
yes,
huge debate, right? But we have it right in South Africa, right? We are not in the. Tutu could have become the president of South Africa, isn't it? After Mandela, he didn't. He stayed out of the state and even criticized the current democratic state, saying, I will pray for your downfall because of the corruption as well. So this is the guarantee for a good democracy, is that you have a strong civil society holding politicians accountable for their political and moral mandate, in which religious people can play a very, very important role in that regard.
Imam, what is the ethos of the Masjid that Imam is trying to... Some people, the terms in the media, the agenda that the Imam's trying to provide from the Masjid here to the community. Sometimes the rumors that there was a lot of controversies in the Masjid, and we spoke before here about it. Some of it you actually explained. You said, like, people are saying 1, 2, 3, but actually it happened 1, 2, 3. Some Muslims, they tried to break into the Masjid because this Masjid is doing like weird stuff. And many times Imam is trying to bring what we call the interfaith into this Masjid, speaking about different religions, bringing like a priest to speak here. Don't you find like these kind of controversies, if that's a right term, might affect the unity of Muslims here, or you have a different opinion from the understanding of Islam?
Yeah, again, these are sad moments, isn't it? But we can learn lessons from that. So go back to, unity and, what you call controversy. If at the time Imam Haron, right, and myself later on, if we were not wanting controversy, we would never have participated in the anti-apartheid struggle. Because for other Muslims, it was taboo. It was, what are you doing? You're not supposed to get involved in politics. And we were not thinking of it as politics. We were thinking of it as struggling for justice against tyranny. Right? That if they stayed silent, it's the same thing. So of course you want to do it in the best way possible, with hikmah, with wisdom, and so on. So on the question of two questions, women and interfaith. So there's a lot of distortion that in this masjid, people can just, women and men can pray anywhere. Women are leading the salah, making khutbah. This is not true. Women don't lead the salah here. They have never done so. And I am not there theologically. I don't accept it as, or deliver a khutbah.
The khutbah is when they speak on Friday.
Yes, the two sermons, right? What we do have in Cape Town, it's very strange again. In South Africa, the 99% of the Masjid, of the mosques, they deliver the sermon in Arabic. They believe it must be done in Arabic. Even if the Imam doesn't understand it, or even if he doesn't say it correctly, he sings it in Urdu, as long as it is in Arabic. We don't have it here. From the 70s, with the students after Imam Haron. Imam Haron didn't start that, you see that? But his students continued. So it's not one person, it's a movement. They started in the Stegman Road Masjid, making the khutbah in the language of the people, right? The sermons. So they would, whenever they quote the Quran, they will give the Arabic, or the Hadith, the Arabic, but then the explanation, they will give it in English, so people can understand. So this is one of the only masjids that does that. So we only have two sermons, which is what Islam demands for the Friday Jummah. But in other mosques, 99%, they have three. They have a translation, a tarjuma, in English, and then they do the Arabic. So this is not really part of the... So what we used is, we said, well, we don't do that, but if we want to invite a woman, she can speak the pre-khutbah.
Like a lecture in English?
A lecture before.
Pre-khutbah.
Yeah, before the khutbah. Then after she has spoken, I will go in the pulpit, in the mimbar. I will quote verses and hadith that relates to what she has spoken. We can even invite a Christian. So interestingly enough, shortly after inviting a woman to speak like that, and it created some... I invited a Palestinian Christian, very prominent. This was now 1994, over 30 years ago, when the issue of Palestine was still not as... I invited a man by the name of Canon Naeem Atiq. He is from the West Bank. He has an organization called As-Sabil, very famous organization. And he spoke. And then I told him, just tone down on the Arabic, because his mother tongue is Arabic, because people will think you are delivering the khutbah. I have to do. And we had a great laugh, but he gave a good talk. So this is the one thing. The second thing is about interfaith. We have to show all non-Muslims, whether they believe or not, bir and qist. God says to us in Quran, God does not prevent you from showing good conduct, being just and kind to those who do not share your faith, but they want to live in peace with you, and they don't drive you from your homes. So there are two kinds of... There are those who are aggressive towards us, who don't want to give you religious freedom, then of course they are and the majority of people who are not Muslims are like that, right? It's very clear. I mean, very clear verse in Quran. That's the paradigm through which every other verse in Quran should be. If someone wants to live in peace with you, and so I believe this is a very, very important thing. This is part of our message. That whenever I'm speaking from the pulpit, I'm always saying, how will this resonate with someone who's not of my faith? Will it inspire him as well? Or will it say to him, you are in the fire and you are so bad and so. This was the message of Islam. It is rahmatan lil alameen. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was a source of mercy, compassion, tenderness, not lil Muslimin, to all. And this is, everyone understands this, but how do we practice? So now I want to give you one last example. I know I'm jumping.
Yeah, we have the last 10 minutes, so I just want to...
Yeah. So this is my message to Palestinians, especially those people from Harakat al-Shabab, the Hamas, Haraka Muqawama Islamiyya. This is the lesson they can learn from South Africa. Don't worry about ICJ. Alhamdulillah, that's great. But you are Muslims, we have Muslims here. We are 2%, 2%.
In South Africa.
Yeah, but see our role. Much more than our demographic status. How did it come about? Because of our role in the anti-apartheid struggle. Not all of us, but those who led. But we are feeling so free in this country. I don't want to go to any Arab country or Muslim majority country because I will be constrained to say some of the things. Isn't it? You know that. I'm free. Hurriyatul Deen is here. But we are 2%. So this is the lesson for Hamas and our Muslim co-religionists. Our Christians in this country, like Tutu and others, they've lifted us up as equal citizens. So we are judging them. We are not worried. How are you lifting up your Christians? In a future Palestinian state, inshallah, if a Christian Palestinian can say the same thing that I'm saying, oh, I feel so free in this Palestinian state. I can practice my religion. I love my brothers. I don't want to go. This is how I will judge them. This is a powerful lesson. Don't you think so? From South Africa. And it's lost amidst all of this. So this is a very powerful lesson that we can, and that's why Interfaith, of course now Interfaith also, it is being exploited, right, as soft power. After the Arab Spring, you have King Abdul Aziz, Institute for Culture and Religion, UAE bringing the Pope, co-opting, and the Sheikh al-Azhar to UAE. Of course, they have learned the power of interfaith to placate, but I'm not talking about that interfaith. I'm talking about interfaith solidarity in the struggle for justice.
Imam, I want to end up with an important point that we speak to all our guests about Palestine. Palestine is a mix of culture and history, and there's a lot of solidarity in between Palestine and South Africa from the apartheid time. When did Palestine come into Imam's life? And what is Imam trying to do here in the Masjid, in between the communities? We spoke about the community that support Palestine, the big Palestine in the Middle East, but forgets about his own Palestine neighbors around. Firstly, when did Palestine come into your life? And what is Imam it's trying to do to mix between that Palestine and this Palestine?
Yeah. So Palestine, as you know, has always been very close to the struggle in South Africa. So it's been there from the get-go. As Mandela, his beautiful quotation, South Africa can never be free until Palestinians are free. So we've always had that solidarity, and we know that when our anti-apartheid movement started, they got a lot of support from the Palestinians. And I believe it is the moral conscience of the world. This is the most important struggle. All other struggles are linked to that, right? I cannot emphasize it enough, but just to have that Zionist state of Israel, they want to control the whole world. Even in South Africa, Zionists insert themselves everywhere to sustain the state of Israel. Right? So that's the most important struggle for the world. And that's why people are so concerned about what's happening in Syria, because if Syrians are isolating themselves and abandoning Palestinians, it's a no-go. They're going to, in the same way that South Africa understands. So Palestine has always been a very, very important, but 2 points. The one is our witness for justice for Palestinians is not a sectarian one. What do I mean by that? It's not only because they share our faith, because the majority of Palestinians are Muslims, because they are mustad'afeen, they are oppressed people. And so, from our side, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign resonates more with us than Al-Quds Foundation, which is more narrow Islamic, right? And we're coming from an Islamic, but we think that this one, because Jews, South African Jews for free Palestine, they are important. We had them twice in the last, since the genocide in Gaza, to have a Shabbat service in the Masjid. Did you know they had a Shabbat service?
Inside here.
Well, we had them outside, just outside there, and then they came inside. And they had a meal, and we had talks. But no other masjid wanted to do that, which is sad. We have to fight anti-Semitism. We know that it's been exploited by Zionists, everything. But we are not against Jews. We are not against Christians. That's sectarianism. The Quranic verse is very clear. Stand firmly for justice, even if it's against yourself. Even if it's against your family. Otherwise, we are just like everyone else. They're just standing for justice when it's for themselves. So that's a very important point. And then the last point that you mentioned, you cannot be standing for justice for Palestinians, but when there are mustad'afin in your own neighborhood, you are ignoring that. So one of the big challenges for us Alhamdulillah, we have done exceptionally well in South Africa. Every day there are protests for Palestine. Yesterday there was a very big one outside, the Jewish Holocaust Museum for the International Day of Genocide, and we said, never again for everyone. But if you are not concerned about injustices happening in your own neighborhood, charity begins at home, isn't it? Then this seems to me, so this is a challenge that we have. So at the same time that we are having this Palestinian solidarity, we are also working very hard in our own communities, bringing them along, linking, the struggles for justice, which is so important.
Imam, thank you so much for your time and all this beautiful stories. I appreciate our talk. And until our next episode, goodbye.